And again, welcome to the Stats Lab. I'm glad to see so many of you here. I see a lot of students from my section of RES 7000, which I'm glad to see, as well as welcome to those of you who I haven't had a chance to really meet in the online environment yet. Again, my name is Kelly Odare, and I teach RES 7000 at Indiana Tech, and I'll be teaching another class next semester, and I always, usually every session, serve as a Stats Lab coordinator. That's actually how I started teaching classes here. I just did the Stats Lab coordination and then enjoyed that so much, graduated up to teaching the whole class in addition to doing the coordination. So I enjoy teaching this class very much. I also very much enjoy teaching it with PhD students. I've taught for a significant amount of time teaching primarily bachelor's and master's level research students, and I'm glad to say, and you all will be glad to know, that there definitely or typically is a big difference between those students and the PhD level researchers. So I'm glad to hear and see that and read that in the information that I get as an instructor. A little bit of background, don't want to go into too many details just because we're on a limited amount of time, and I want to give you guys as much exposure to SPSS as much as possible. My background is in quantitative data analysis of large data sets, so I've used SPSS quite a bit in both academic research and also in applied research. And in the workplace, I worked for my state legislature for about 6 years doing research on different projects that they needed information on, and I was sort of the go-to person to help with methods and research design and data analyses. So while there's a lot that I don't know, I do know quite a few things, and I hope to be helpful to you in your use of SPSS this session and possibly in the future if I do have you for one of your classes. I also recognize that we probably have quite a broad range of experience levels with SPSS and with research in general on the class tonight. So keeping that in mind, I kind of try to teach towards the median, meaning I try not to be too slow-paced, but I also try not to be really, really fast-paced. So everyone will kind of fall along the spectrum somewhere. Please feel free to stop me at any time and ask a question if you have them. One other caveat, I am using a Mac tonight, and this is my first time doing the session with SPSS on the Mac, so I really hope that there are not any glitches. I don't think that there will be, but we'll keep our fingers crossed with regard to that. SPSS is a very valuable tool. It is incredibly useful. It's also incredibly complex and complicated, but yet so simple. The producers of SPSS have done an incredible job of taking something that's so extraordinarily complicated that I can barely get my head around it and boiling it down to where anybody with a little bit of experience, point and click on the computer and a good sense of what they're doing with regard to their data can use this program to help them answer their research questions. So it's incredibly useful. It's very important that you guys get to know how to use it and can do just the basic things on it. Like I said, it's incredibly complex, but just to be able to get it to do some very easy, useful things is incredibly helpful. So I hope that if you're falling on the end of the spectrum that's really overwhelmed and unfamiliar with it, hopefully it won't be too daunting of a task. And for those of you who are really experienced with it and have done a lot of work with it, well, then you could jump in any time and help me out if there's something that I'm missing or some information that you think would be helpful that you can provide. Just briefly, I want to click over to our Blackboard module. Hopefully that'll go away. Let's get that to go away. Can everybody see the Blackboard module now? Okay, good. Thank you. I just wanted to direct your attention. I sent out a couple emails about it down here. Our supplemental materials tab has a lot of resources in it that I've put in there, some resources anyway. Some of it is class specific, So it may not be relevant to your section, but what will be relevant to every section of the class is this SPSS resources folder that I put together. And I hope that you have checked it out, or if you haven't checked it out, you will check it out, because there's some very good resources on here for SPSS. The two, I kind of listed them in order of my favorites of usefulness. My webcam's turning on. Oh, that's Mike. That's Mike's webcam. We can see you on the webcam, Mike. Oh, there, now Mike's gone. Okay. So in order of how I like them, I think this UCLA SPSS page is tremendously helpful, lots of information on there. This YouTube channel is pretty darn good. I didn't check out the author of it. I think I did look at him at one point, and I think he is a professor somewhere. But he just has a lot of tutorials on his YouTube channel about SPSS. So you can go on here and find what module you're working with and watch the tutorial. And I think it'll be really helpful. For this first week, we're going to be way down here on how to set up SPSS, how to do descriptive statistics, those things. And they're pretty short. And it's nice, if you're a visual learner and you want to see somebody take you through step by step on how to do it. The other resources are more of a web page with different resources that you can go through and learn. So hopefully those will be helpful to you as you go through the assignments. So tonight what we're going to do is we're going to go through some samples of the SPSS. And now the examples that we go through are going to be different than what's due in your homework. There was a little bit of confusion on that. So just keep in mind we're going to go through some examples tonight, and those will list on the SPSS handout. And then what you have to turn in for your homework 4 is these actual questions listed down here under your homework 4. And I will be the one going in and grading all of the sections of the class on homework 4. So even if you have another instructor for the class, I'll be the one who grades homework 4 and homework 5. What I would prefer that you do, please, is post one file with all of the work. Scan it in, however you like to do that sort of thing. Please just have one file, because if there's like tons of different attachments, it's really hard for me to manage them all and to find the information that I need. So, you're going to have several output printouts from SPSS, and then you're going to have a page that you print out with just your answers on it. Some students like to actually tear the pages out of the book, out of the workbook, and write their answers on that and then scan it all in with their output. That's fine too. Again, however you want to do it, it's fine. Just find a method that works for you and that's comfortable for you, but that also will be very legible and easy for me to download. And like I said, I prefer it all in one file. Are there any questions about the submission of the homework? Okay, I'll either assume that my microphone has shut off or that nobody has any questions. Okay, okay, good. So good question. How do we export the SPSS outputs to a Word doc or PDF if we don't have a printer? That's a very good question. And when we open up the program and start walking through it, I will address that. And if for some reason I forget, you can remind me. All right, so clicking back over to SPSS. I opened this up from my desktop. As I mentioned, it may look different on your screen, but it's pretty easy to open. There's several different ways you can do it. I'll go ahead and exit out and open it back up again. I have to go over here in my launch pad to do it. I open it up. And it gives me this little pop-up, and it's asking me a bunch of different options. If I want to open an existing data source, if I want to run a tutorial, that might be helpful, or these other choices. But for now, I'm just going to click Cancel because I want to look at my screen here, my SPSS editor screen, and go through, there we go, go through some of the important things. So if you're a brand newbie to it, you'll see here that it kind of looks really similar to an Excel file. You have rows and you have columns, and that's the orientation, and that's how the variables are put in. One of the big differences in the formatting is if you look down here at the bottom of the screen, you have two tabs. You have a data view tab and a variable view tab. And that's kind of important because your data view tab is going to be where you actually input your values for data. And it's being slow. There we go. Etc. Okay. And you can see here that the rows are down the left-hand side and the columns are on top on the right-hand side. And all these columns here have the same thing. They say var or var for variable. And as you type your data in, it's going to change that name to something random, var2, var3, var4, etc. Okay. When you go over here to your variable view, that's where you can go and you can name your different variables. This is where all of the characteristics of the variables themselves are contained. So you would go in and you would change this to whatever your variable is in your data set. Etc. Okay, and then you can assign the other different characteristics to this variable. Like, obviously, for some of them you might not want decimals. I suggest taking them out. You'll also definitely want to know what type you have and put the type in, because what you can do, the type of analyses that you can do with a particular variable is largely dependent on the type that you assign to it. So make sure that you are assigning the appropriate type to the appropriate variable. So when you click back over into your data view, you're going to see here now over at the top, the var has been replaced with the names that I assigned to the different variables. Is the string alphanumeric? Good question. So we could go over here and it'll tell you, SPSS is very particular about how the variables are named. You can do letters and numbers, but you can't do certain symbols, so it'll let us do that. But it may not let us, it won't let you put a space. It may not let us put a pound. Let's see. Oh, it let us put a pound. There are certain characters that it will not let you use, but it is pretty liberal with the characters that it will let you use. It used to not be. But as I mentioned, SPSS really has come quite a long way in being user-friendly, even more so than when I started using it, and that was relatively recently in the grand scheme of SPSS. But it's very, very much, like I said, if you can handle pointing and clicking, it makes it incredibly user-friendly and more accessible to individuals to help us do research and answer questions and find out information. So it will let you know if you try to name a variable something that it doesn't like, it'll give you an error or pop-up message right away. And the same thing, the other ones are kind of self-explanatory, whether or not you can put letters in there or not. Okay. So now we can see that we can go in and say we're creating a data set. We can go ahead and go in and enter all of our information, kind of similarly to how we would be navigating around an Excel worksheet. All right, but say we want to do what we have to do for our assignment, and we have to open a data set. We're going to go to Open, and we're going to locate where our data set is. Mine is on my disk. And there we go. And we would just choose one, and it should open. Okay, and there we go. As we can see, all of our variables now are listed across the top. Some of them have common names that we understand. Most of them do not. Most of them have codes. This is why we would need a code book for a data set like this. If we were doing real research, we would want a code book, or we would want to print some of that information. I think that's in one of your exercises that you have to do, is print some of those. Sometimes if you mouse over them, depending on, again, what program, what computer you're using, you can see what the label for them is, and you can see why the researcher has decided to shorten them. And over here in the variable view, the label should correspond to what this says. Okay, and it tells you whether it's string, numeric, also the level of measure. That's important because there's only certain types of analyses we can do with certain types of levels of measure of variable. All right, and here is where we get to start doing the fun stuff. This is where we can do the analysis from here. So we have our data set open, and this is when we would start to do our different activities. Usually you're going to want to do your analyses from the data view. Some of them can be done from the variables view, but I don't recommend it. I guess if you're comfortable with it and that's how you do it, you can. I don't know if all the same functions are available in variables as in data, but they may be. I just kind of like to be in data view. Also, what's really important with this version of SPSS to keep in mind that you can have multiple files open at the same time. Previously in SPSS, you could only have one data set open at a time, which was kind of a blessing, but kind of a curse. It was a blessing because you didn't get confused on what data set you were running your analyses on, but it was a curse because you had to complete analysis, close your data set up, go in, open your other data set up in order to do subsequent analyses. Now, as you'll see, we still have this one, kind of our made up first one open, and we have the other one open. So we need to ensure that when we're running our analyses, that we're doing it in the one we want to be doing it in. Okay, any questions so far? And again, feel free, you can always turn your mic on to ask a question. Don't feel like you have to try to type real fast to ask a question. Okay, another important point is that there are 3 types of file extensions in SPSS. And by file extensions, I mean these dot character up here. So dot .sav, if it was a Word document, it'd be dot .doc, I think Excel is dot .xls, etc. So SPSS has 3 different types of those. And it's going to be important to know which is which when you're dealing with it. So your data editor is always your SAV. Okay, that's where your data editor is. You really don't do much other stuff in the data editor besides maybe kind of eyeball some data sometimes if your data set's small enough, or input data. But if you're working with a really big data set that you've imported from somewhere else, you're not going to actually do a lot of typing in or a lot of changing into the data view. You might need to tweak some variables, etc. But that's not really where a lot of the action is. You also have, and we're just going to close this one out so we can, no, I don't want to save it. I just want to close it. Again, this is my learning curve for Mac. Save changes to the following data set. No. Okay. Then we have this guy over here, which is our output. This is another type of file extension. And this is the one that you are going to probably become the most familiar with. This is the one where all of the different analyses is printed. When you tell SPSS what to do, you feed all the information in, the output is where it gives you the answers that you're looking for. And now this is the one that someone asked a question about, well, how do we export this to SPSS if we don't have a printer? There should be a way to export. Okay. Again, just look around in your program. If you're, I don't know if you're using Mac or if you're using Windows, but there should be a way to go ahead and export it and to tell it to save it as a PDF, or you can export it to Word. And depending on what type of output you have, you also can export it into Excel if you want to save it for later analyses. So give that a try on your own if you need to, and then you don't have to worry about actually having a paper printer to paper print it. Okay. The next type of file that I'm just going to touch on very briefly is called a syntax file. And that is the kind of the, think of that as the behind the scenes file that's being made every time that you do something in SPSS. There's a syntax file being made. A long, long time ago, when SPSS first came out, the only way to use it was through syntax, was through writing code. You had to know how to write the code to tell the program to do what you wanted it to do. So that got, you had to have a pretty high level of knowing how to write computer code in order to do that. In addition, you had to have a pretty high level of statistics and research to be able to know what you wanted to tell the code to tell SPSS to do. So it's pretty cumbersome, and a lot less people, I think, were willing to learn SPSS because of that. But then they moved to this more point-and-click, menu-driven style, and it really opened up a whole new world for SPSS. So even though we have the point-and-click now, the syntax is still running in the background the whole time. And a lot of researchers, myself included, will still learn how to write syntax because sometimes it's a lot faster if you just want to do some kind of quick analyses that you don't want to take a lot of time and you can't remember what menu option is under up here. It's just really easy to write it in syntax. And also, and more importantly, and I really recommend that you start doing this from the very beginning, because as you move to more complicated research projects and, of course, towards your dissertation, if you're doing a quantitative dissertation using SPSS, your syntax is kind of your audit trail for everything that you've done. So if you need to replicate any of your analyses for any reason, you want to have that audit trail of exactly what you've done, so that way you can go back and do it again if you need to. If you need to change a little something, a variable, add a variable in, take a variable out, etc. If you have that syntax file ready to open, you can go in and just make some simple changes as opposed to having to do your entire analyses from soup to nuts all over again. So again, it may not be required, but it's my strong suggestion to you that even if you don't learn how to write the syntax, just be saving the syntax as you go so you have it if you need it. And I'll show you what that type of a file looks like. We'll just do something really simple. We'll do a frequency on state. Okay, see how I'm pointing and clicking here? And again, we're going to go back step by step and do some of the examples. So if you feel like I'm going a little quickly right now, it's okay. I just want to show you how to paste into the syntax. So I'm pointing and clicking, and I'm telling SPSS that I want to have a frequency distribution for the variable state. Okay? And instead of just clicking OK, which is what SPSS is eagerly encouraging me to do by the blinking blue button here, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to click paste. And what that's going to do is it's going to open this third type of file that I mentioned, which is my syntax file. And here is basically the code that all that pointing and clicking just generated. Okay? So this is going to keep myself an audit trail of everything that I do in SPSS. And I can put a note in here. If you're going to put notes, you have to delineate them with some sort of character that SPSS won't read. I usually use little stars. I'll say something like 9/26, 2013, running frequencies on state because blah, 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 blah. Okay. Just leave myself notes about what I'm doing, and then I'll go on to paste in some further analyses. So as you can see, we don't have any output because we clicked paste and not run. All we have to do at that point is just highlight what we want to run and hit the little play button, I like to call it, and it actually runs the information. And now we have our coveted output of all of our information here that we want. Okay. So as opposed to, I'm just going to X out of that. As opposed to if we would have just gone in and done it this way and hit OK, it would just run it for us and not give us any syntax file. All right. Okay, any questions on the three different types of files? Okay, and when you submit your assignments, I just need the output file. So I just need the files that give us the goods, that give us the information we're looking to learn about. I don't need the syntax or the data files. All right, let's go into a few examples then. Yes, so the question is if we only need the SPSS output. Yes, we need the, now I don't want to say we only need the answer because I don't want you to take the information that's on the output and like transcribe it into a Word document. I need the actual output. So for that example, this is the document right here. You would want to either print and scan or export into a PDF file or however you want to do it. This is the output file right here you need. You can go in, you can make a folder for it on your desktop, save it, open it back up later. Depending on what kind of program you're running, again, you can export it, those sorts of things. Okay, so for our exercises for this week, the first one we need to tackle is Chapter 2, Question 2. And if you have your data analysis book, you can follow along with me. That is on page 40. Okay, it looks like, let me check some chat questions here just quickly. Okay, so it looks like Wiltsy was trying to export her output file but had trouble. Wiltsy, are you using a Mac or a Windows? Windows, okay. I unfortunately can't help you out because I don't have recall about how to do that. But it should, let's see what it does if we click Save. See, this, my Mac here should give me a option to save as a PDF, which it's not. I might have to print it as a PDF, but it will give me the option to export it. And then I can change the options and export it that way. And you can go into Excel, PDF, plain text, Word, depending on how you want to do it. You know, my suggestion to you is just, if you can, just go ahead and export it into PDF. Don't try to get fancy. Excel's nice if you're preparing a report or whatever to be able to pull it all into Excel, but then you have to worry about, for me, for this class, printing it, scanning it, turning it in. So if you just export it into PDF and then make it all one big file before you turn it in, that would be really helpful. Okay, so the other question was, yes, you enter all the data into the program and submit the data file, which includes the answer to the exercise. Yes, exactly. So the answer to your exercises is going to have your written answers or typed answers, however you choose to do it, and then also this SPSS output is kind of like your backup for where you got your answers from. And maybe after we go through this first exercise here, that'll make it a little bit more evident. So let's go ahead and get started on that. Again, on page 40, it's telling us to open the State 10 data set, which is what we did. So we have our State 10 data set open here that we pulled from the CD that we got. And it's telling us to look in the variable view window and to examine the following concepts. So the variable names begin with a 2-letter code of the general topic of the variable. So it's telling us a little bit about what these codes mean here. Okay. And what it's telling us to do is to find the ones that have to do with economic prosperity, to tell us the variable name, and then to also tell us what the variable label is. So what we would do is we would look down and we would find the ones that correspond with that. And this one here, I guess that's a little bit confusing. For this one, you won't really need an SPSS output because you can get all of this information just from looking around, and for writing it, again, you can write it on your page 40, scan that and send it to me, rip it right out of the book. The pages are perforated. I don't know if you've noticed that. so you can do that. Just however, whatever system works for you, a lot of students will do it differently. But this particular one won't call for an SPSS output. This one's pretty easy. And it tells you how to do that in the chapter, beginning of chapter 2. All right, any questions on that one? Okay, so we'll move on to chapter 2, number 4, which is the next sample exercise here, page 42. Now it's telling us that we need to open the GSS08 data set. So now remember, this is the state 10 data set that we opened. So we need to go back in, and you can either close this one out, or you can leave it open if you feel like you'll be good at remembering which one you're working with. We can go ahead and we can open the state 10. Oh, I guess we already have it open. Oh, wait, sorry. Got myself confused. The GSS08 is what we need to open, this one. All right. So you'll see this data set, and again, we can make sure we're working in the right one by looking up here. This one looks a little bit different. Click over to the data view. You can see we have quite a few more variables than this one. Okay. Probably quite a few more records. I'm going to scroll all the way to the end and see how many records there are in this one. I don't remember how many there are, but there are quite a few. So that's why it's one of the reasons why this data editor, if it's a big data set, you really can't eyeball stuff in here because you're just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and it's kind of pointless. So that's why you're going to use the functions to be able to do that. What you're going to do for this question here is you're going to examine a particular variable that's in here, which is the SATFIN variable, or the satisfaction with the financial situation. So there's several different ways we can find the variable. We go over in variable view, and we can do a control find. And there it is, it'll find our variable. Again, there's a lot more ways than one to do some of these things. So if you're more comfortable finding a particular variable a particular way, feel free to do it. As long as the method gets you to the same answer, it's okay. There's definitely a lot more than one way to do a lot of these things. So you just have to come up and find your variable. And we're just going to kind of examine it here. It's a numeric variable, has no decimal places. We can check out this label and see SATFIN really means satisfaction with financial situation. And we can see here that it has some variables, or I'm sorry, some values associated with it, okay?
Professor, could I jump in here?
Hey there, sure, go ahead. Does someone have a question?
Yeah, this is Brian. I tried to do the control find, but I'm not unable to type in any information. Did I do something wrong here?
Okay, make sure that you are in the different variable that you want to search in. So see here where I just clicked, I'm up here, I'm in name. Make sure that you're not clicked on like type and trying to search in there.
Oh,
okay. Make sure you're clicked on.
Okay, yeah, that did it. Okay, I got it.
Okay, good deal.
Thanks.
Yeah, there's all these little nuances that you'll kind of learn as you go. So SATFIN here, again, it's a numeric type of variable. So that means it's a number, 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, what does a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or a 4 mean? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me logically if I think about it. If I ask somebody, if I ask somebody how satisfied they are with their financial situation, they're probably going to say something like pretty satisfied, not really satisfied, very satisfied, neutral, those sorts of answers. Not really, someone really wouldn't say to me, oh, I'm a 1, I'm a 4, those sorts of things. However, we can take those string answers, such as very, not very, etc. We can assign a number to them, okay? So that way we can do some other types of analyses with that variable if we need to. So here we can look and see what those are called value labels. All right. So and your code books that come with data sets will usually tell you what some of these abbreviations mean. But a 0 means inapplicable. A 1 means satisfied. 2 means more or less, which I'm not really sure that's very well conceptualized. I don't know what that is. Not at all, don't know, not applicable. Or I'm sorry, no answer, which is different from inapplicable. Okay, so you can go in and you can identify those. That's how we would see those value labels. All right. You can also see, the question doesn't ask you about this, but it'll also assign values, missing values. So you know if a value has an 8, a 9, or a .000, it means that the information was missing. And this will be important down the road because as a researcher, sometimes one of the more frustrating and difficult questions we have to answer is what to do with missing data, especially if there ends up being a lot of it in our data set. So we have to make sure that our missing values are coded differently than what actual values for our responses should be. All right. Now, moving right down to question 5, which is the next sample question in chapter 2. It's telling us that we need to be looking in the GSSO8 data set again. This particular researcher wants to understand the distribution of income in the U.S. So she's looking at the data view, which I would, forewarn her not to do anyway, and sees that the values range mostly from 1 to 25, but occasionally she sees the number 98. Again, it's telling us what variable we're looking for, which is income 06. Make sure we're in the name. There we go. Okay. She sees the number 98. Now, this is what we were just talking about with the missing data. She explains that the data must be wrong because no one has an income of 10. Her instructor tells her that the data are fine and asks her to come back when she can explain how much family income for 10 is. So in order to do that, again, we would need to go in here and check out our label. And we can see that somebody who reported a value of 10 would have the income threshold of $12,500 to $14,999. Okay, which is different than a 98 or a 99, which means those data would be missing for whatever reason. Okay, so just really, familiarize yourself with the layout of your data set. Usually that's what I like to do when I get a brand new data set that I haven't worked with before, is I spend quite a bit of time understanding exactly what I have in front of me. In an ideal world, it'll come with a nice, neat code book that explains everything I need to know, but a lot of times, a lot of agencies don't keep code books at all. If they do, they're not really helpful. A lot of mistakes in there, can't really figure stuff out. So I like to just spend a lot of time looking around and getting a sense of what I have. Are most of my variables numeric, or are they mostly string? Or do I have a mix of both? Because this starts really me thinking about, well, what am I going to be able to do with these data? What type of value labels do I have? What type of missingness information do I have? And then oftentimes I'll go over to my data and I'll do, just basic univariate analyses with each one of my variables in question, because I want to understand what we have for each of our variables really well. Even if it's just frequencies and descriptive statistics to start out with, we have to do those univariate analyses first to give us some level of confidence that our data are good moving forward when we start to move towards inference and to doing some more advanced statistical procedures. We need to ensure that the data are clean and that they're good before we move forward and do that. All right, any questions with the Chapter 2 stuff? Because I'm going to go ahead and move on to Chapter 3, which is talking about univariate analyses. So our first sample is on page 69, Chapter 3, Question 1. And it's telling us that we need to be using the GSS08 data set. And it's also telling us that, and researchers do this a lot, this is basically kind of a very rough way of telling you to make a hypothesis. So before you do this, it's going to, you're going to make a prediction about what you think the results are going to be. It can be anything you want. You don't have to do anything you want. And then we're going to go in and use the data to see the differences between our prediction, or AKA hypotheses, and also our actual percentages. In order to do that, we need to know how to run a frequency. So we're going to go over, make sure we're in our GSS08 data set, and we're going to run a frequency. And I'm going to use the point and click, and I'm going to go to descriptive statistics, frequencies. I'm going to find my mare variable. And I can't tell how this is organized. There we go. You can change these variables the way that they're ordered to be alphabetical, which is kind of a way I like to do it with a new data set, and I can find things faster. When I start creating and renaming variables, I'll leave it in time order of how I did it, because then I know the most recent ones I've done are usually towards the end. But again, it's just kind of once you get your own method of madness to be able to do it. So all I need to do here is run a frequency on the happiness of marriage. And it's also telling me to create a publishable pie chart. Then we have to do a little description of our findings on the worksheet that we have and make some determination as to whether the hypothesis was borne out by the actual observations. So we've put our variable, moved our variable over here into where we want to have this analysis done. Now there's a couple different ways we can go about doing a pie chart. The easiest one is to just go right in here, point and click, and tell SPSS that's what we want it to do. And we want percents. We don't want frequencies, because the question has asked us to predict percents and then actual percents. We'll make sure that we click percent. We're going to click continue. All right, I think I have everything that I want. And now remember, if it were me, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to click paste. So that way I have it in my syntax file. Okay. And then I can go and I can run it from my syntax file. And here is what the information is telling us. This is what the observations are telling us, okay? 29%, very happy. 17%, pretty happy. 1.5%, not too happy. Lots of missing in there, maybe because all those people were not married. Half the sample was not married. Maybe that's why it's inapplicable. So those are the reasons why we need to understand what those value labels mean, so that way we don't just think that for some reason 51% of our sample didn't fill out the form for that question. That's why we need to know a little bit of something about what all these labels mean. And there is our easy breezy pie chart. Okay. Another way to do that is we could go into graphs. Chart Builder is the new fancy one that we can click on and build a lot of really nice charts. The legacy dialogues are the old school ones that I learned on, but this Chart Builder is pretty nice. And it can do a lot of different things. So if you have time to sit and check it out, I would highly recommend it. Any questions on that? Again, remember, if you wanted to go in and do that without doing syntax, you would do the exact same thing, except you would just click OK instead of clicking paste. And then I'll give you the exact same output. All right, yes, so there will be a recorded copy of this session with all the other sessions. Yes. It may take me a little while to do it because I have to, for some reason, Blackboard won't let me just embed them in Blackboard, I think because the files are so large. So I have to translate it over to YouTube, and then I have to post it via YouTube. So I'll get it done just as soon as I can. Probably won't be tonight, though. Okay, moving right along. Chapter 3, number 2, question 2. Page 70 if you're following along. All right, back again to using the GSSO8. It's now asking us to construct and print a bar chart displaying how common marital infidelity is, which they are labeling as EVSTRAY. So we're going to go back over to, not to go to meeting. And this is where when you have a lot of data sets open at one time, the management of them is so important. That's why typically I just like to close stuff out that I'm not using so I don't drive myself crazy clicking on the wrong thing. All right. We are going to want to construct and print a bar chart of a particular variable. It's asking us to give it an appropriate title and we want to make it aesthetically pleasing. So that's when you might want to go over into that chart builder and do some things like that. It's also telling us specifically that we want to exclude the missing cases. And then it's moving on to another component. Instead of just asking us to spit out some data, it's also asking us to interpret what this finding indicates about monogamy and marriage. Also, in the second part, it's asking us to think ahead. What types of variables might predict if an individual is unfaithful? And can we find those variables in this data set that we think might predict? So again, maybe we're wanting to come up with a hypothesis about what might predict infidelity in marriage. And then it's asking us to do some summary statistics of those indicators and describe them. All right, so let's start with the first one it's telling us to do. Okay, we got to take the happiness of marriage back out. That's one thing to keep in mind. And we're going to look for our next variable, which happens to be right underneath. I'm going to move it over. Okay. See what kind of chart we want. This one particularly asked for a bar chart. Now, this bar chart in this particular point and click menu isn't going to be quite as fancy as the one you can make with the chart developer. So if you want to, get real fancy, make it look nice, use the other one. And let's see, we want percentages or frequencies. Maybe let's just do frequencies on this one to see the difference. So I'm going to paste it in, and I'm going to go over to my syntax file, and I'm going to run that. Okay. So here we go. This is a dichotomous question. It's just asking yes, no. So 51% said no, 10% said yes, for a total of 62% of our population, of our sample. And that's because it was inapplicable for 36%, which meant that maybe that portion wasn't married. And then here we have our bar chart, your basic run-of-the-mill bar chart. All right. So someone's asking the S-stray variable was right underneath that first one we did. It was right. I would recommend changing the way that they're listed to a way that better suits you, or if you're more comfortable just mousing over and giving it a second to pop up the value label, it can do that. All right, while we're in here, let's go ahead and make some predictions here. Well, let's get out of here so we can take a look at them. We're going to go over to the variable view and look at these labels. All right. Does anybody want to offer up a couple of variables that they think might influence marital infidelity? Respondent's astrological sign. How about that one? What do you guys think? Does anyone see something here that they think they might want to try? How about maybe respondent's income? Again, I'm just guessing. How about maybe we'll do respondent's income and income or job? Yep, good. And how about we'll do spouse's labor force stats? Okay, so we'll do those two, because for whatever reason we think that that's going to may have a correlation. All right. So what the exercise is asking us to do is we're going to create summary statistics of these indicators and describe them. So we'll go up here and we'll just do some basic descriptive statistics, okay, for those couple of variables. Going to take that one back out. And now this is an example of some that we can do together. We'll do both of these together. So find our variable. Whoa, come on back. What did we say? What do we say? Spouse's occupation, maybe? Oh, occupational prestige score. That could be interesting. We'll take a look at that one. And just for ease sake, we'll look at total family income. Make sure that that's what that one is. Okay. We can make a chart for these if we wanted to. No, our chart. And this one here.
I have a question.
Hi there. Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the variables that you're looking at are different from what we have on the way they're titled. Because, like, I'm looking at total family income, and I actually don't see that variable, or it's titled something differently from what I'm seeing here. I don't know if that's just me or is that everybody else in the group as well.
Okay. What is it titled for you? What does it say for you?
When we did the first one, mine was just labeled happy. Not, I mean, I think you had like a phrase.
Yeah. Now don't forget there's a difference between the variable name, which is right here on the left side, and then the variable label. So the label is just a more detailed description of the name. The name is just a shortened abbreviation for the variable. It's something short and sweet to use. So this one that I have highlighted down here on row 35, okay, right. You'll see here that the name of it is SPWRKSTA, which really doesn't mean a lot, you know, for our intents and purposes in the English language. But if we look over here at the value label, at the variable label, we can see that what this variable means in some common sense language is spouse labor force status.
Yeah, I don't think we have that spouse labor force status label. I think it's called something like spouse. I don't know. I don't have those 4 words. It's something else.
Okay. Well, now keep in mind there's a lot of variables in this data set, so it may be that you're just looking at a different variable. Are you looking at a variable that's named SPWRKSTA?
Yeah, I just think the label is it's labeled something different here.
What is it labeled there?
Well, I don't know. I'm trying to find the closest thing to spouse labor force status, and that's what I'm having a hard time identifying.
Okay. Okay. Again, keep in mind there's a lot of variables in this data set, so it might just be that you're actually looking at a different variable.
Yeah, but everything I'm looking at, I don't see. It's like one word. nothing's, yeah, like for instance, like if I go to the very first labeled variable, it's year, ID, marital, age, education, degree, sex, race. Then I see something race.
Are you in the GSSOA?
Yes.
Okay. Are you, you're up here? Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm in the, I'm in this, I don't know, maybe it's just me then. I don't know, I'll figure it out.
Okay. Does your screen look the same as mine?
Well, right now, it does. I have the descriptives up, though. I don't have frequencies. I'm on descriptives. I don't know if that's right or wrong. The pop-up.
Okay. Yeah, you could, you know, just making sure that you're, you know, you can scroll, you can see all these variables. This data set has 125 variables in it. So just make sure that you're looking, you know, at the right, that your screen is scrolled to the right one. And the right one is going to be different for each of the different exercises, for each of the different questions. And then, yes. So
I have 125. Yeah. All right.
Okay. Good. So, and then that's a good point too. If you clicked on Analyze and then Descriptive instead, which you can do, again, like I mentioned, there's many different ways that you can tell SPSS to do something. I would suggest following the way that it tells you in the book, especially if you're new to SPSS. That'll reduce some of the confusion. But that, you know, if you're working with somebody or if you're watching the tutorials online and it looks like they get to something a little bit differently, it's because it's like a decision tree. There's a lot of different ways to kind of branch out to get to the same answer. But again, in order to minimize the amount of confusion, especially if you're new to this, just go by exactly how they lay it out for you step by step in the book. They do a pretty good job of laying it out.
That's a good point. If you go back to like I'm looking at the GSS08, and if you go to Analyze, and then you go to so if you were to close that box, like the box on your screen,
Okay.
If you close that, and then if you go to Analyze, and then you go to Descriptive, statistics, and the first item I have here would be year, and then ID, and then marital. Is that wrong?
No, it doesn't. Okay, if you look, that does match up to how the variables are ordered in the data set. You can see their year, ID. If you look at the value label, see how it says the exact same thing as what's in your box there in your descriptive. So it says GSS year here, it says GSS year there. Respond to ID number, respond to ID number, marital status, marital status.
Yeah, see, for us, for mine, it's just saying year, ID, marital, age.
Okay. Yeah, that's because, and that's fine too. That's just a setting on your computer, is that it's showing the name, it's showing this over here instead of the label.
Oh.
It's just a setting on your computer. If you hover over it, it'll give you the different, it's the same variable, it's just two different ways of calling it.
Okay, so I would have to change the settings so I can see the actual label, not the name.
Yeah, you can. Or you can just hover. If you hover your mouse over it, will it pop up? See how it's doing on my screen? It's popping me up the opposite?
No. If I hover over year or ID, I don't get anything.
Okay. Yeah, that must be the version that you're using on your PC.
Okay. All right, that's what was throwing me off when I couldn't find what you were. Okay, I got it.
Okay, good deal. I'm glad we figured that out. Okay, so let's go back. This might still be there. Oh, we'll move that out. And again, to answer Andre's question, we can choose any variable that we want in here. It doesn't have to be, we're just choosing for what we think, common sense wise, what might have an influence. They could be anything. They could be these two. They could be another two. They could be any of them. But the assignment is just asking us to go in and to do, some of this basic analyses with them. I lost my page. Hang on just a second. Chapter 3. All right. It's just asking us what types of forces might predict if an individual is unfaithful. So that can be different for all of us. We'll just pick something different. And then it's asking us to create some summary statistics of these indicators and describe them. So that's why I would go into frequencies, and then I'm going to move my variables over that I want to do some analysis on. And again, I'm going to paste that into my syntax, and I'm going to run it from there. And it's going to give us this information that the question is asking us for. Okay. So spouse's socioeconomic index, whatever that is, we would have to know what that means in order to think that it's a predictor of infidelity. It's obviously some range from continuous variable. Okay. All right. So this here, how strict are the divorce laws in that person's state? Maybe that predicts whether or not they're going to be unfaithful. We don't know, but basically we just want to do some descriptives on those variables. Mike has a hypothesis, but I don't know if we can test that in this data set because I don't know if there's a variable that would pertain to that, to maybe not getting out much. The less you get out, the less likely you are to be unfaithful to your significant other, maybe. Okay. All right. Any questions? I think that's our last sample exercise for tonight. Does anybody have any general questions? Good. Yeah, it's like I said, I feel like it's fairly user-friendly. But yes, I agree that the more you get in there and actually do it yourself and click on the different options, and the better it'll be. I remember when I was first doing SPSS, it does feel kind of overwhelming and nerve-wracking and anxiety-provoking, especially if you've never done anything like this before. But the examples that the class asks you to do are fairly basic, so it'll help give you just kind of a little taste of what SPSS can do and give you kind of a little bit of a foundation to move forward in your research with using this really helpful program. And of course, if you have any questions, you can always email me and let me know. All right, well, if there are no other questions, I appreciate you all spending your time on the session this evening, and good luck on your assignment, and I will talk to everybody soon. Good night.